They speak of 9 loyal sons, of honor, duty, sacrifice, of gene-forged paragons who stood beside the Emperor at the height of conquest. But silence stains the ledger where the others should be. Not death, not treason, just absence. The kind that stares back. The kind that makes even inquisitors lower their voices. What if those missing names never truly vanished? What if their stories were not erased but buried across the warp-torn span of the galaxy? Fragments surface, ruins that should not exist, oaths spoken in dialects no legion ever claimed, and warriors ancient, gene-marked, and silent who bear no heraldry, but bleed like suns. This is not the tale of the known, this is the echo of the lost. These are the forgotten legacies of the fallen Primarchs. If you have ever questioned the gaps in the Emperor's grand design, if the silence between legions disturbs you more than the screams of heresy, then join us as we descend into the forgotten vaults. Like, share, subscribe, and walk with us into the histories. They never meant to survive. The vault did not breathe. It exhaled nothing. No air stirred behind its triple-forged adamantium faceplate. No light crawled along the seal's gilded filigree. Even the sensorium arrays built into the corridor's arch refused to register its presence. And yet, Shield Captain Andron Satrian of the Adeptus Custodes stood before Edelon, unrecorded, unauthorized. No summons had brought him. No order from the High Lords. Only a misalignment in an ancient fault clock. Buried in the cogitator depths of Segmentum Recordum beneath the Imperial Palace. A clock that, for the first time in its 6,000-year uptime, ticked 1 second too fast. Custodians did not believe in accidents. They acted when reality frayed. The corridor was older than the palace itself. Older, perhaps, than Terra's unification. Stonework, not plasteel. Vaulted ribs of fossilized bonecrete curved overhead like the ribs of a behemoth long extinct. Golden light from his armor's pauldron-mounted torch lenses flickered. Across mural fragments etched into the walls none familiar. No known battle scenes. No imperial iconography. Just repeating geometry, fractal and recursive. Like a mind trying to remember its own dream. The 9th seal stood at the terminus. 7 known vaults were indexed in the Librarium Arcanum. The 8th, according to common record, had been collapsed during the Horus Heresy and never recovered. This one bore no designation, no number, but the seal upon it was unmistakably Terran, not the double-headed Aquila, but a singular eagle, wings curved downward in mourning. An older symbol, one that predated compliance, one never taught. Andron ran his gauntlet across the surface. The seal was not merely locked, it was entombed, warded by gene print, psychic resonance, and something older, something that prickled even the transhuman senses of a custodian. It did not resist his touch. It waited, with emotion honed across centuries. Andron unlatched the mind barriers threaded through his cortex. Memory chains disengaged. Protocol layers peeled back. He keyed his own genetic cipher into the dormant gate. A silent acknowledgement echoed through the walls, not approval, not warning, just awareness. The vault side open. What lay beyond was not crypt nor tomb. It was not constructed for reverence or fear. It was a chamber of function of suspension, a cradle of stasis. Pipes hissed as internal atmospheres adjusted. Mechanisms groaned like slumbering beasts awakening. And in the center, the pod, suspended in anti-grav tethers. It hovered above a nullfield dais, gold-framed, crystal-faced. Its form was unmistakable. Not a sarcophagus, not containment, incubation. Andron stepped closer. The body inside did not age. It did not sleep. It simply was. Male, approximately 2.5 meters in length. Muscular development beyond even baseline, but it was not that which froze the custodian in place. It was the resonance's armor's gene diagnostic units chimed silently, picking up trace patterns in the air around the pod. Mitochondrial signature, genetic drift index, telomere cap ratios, all pointed to one conclusion. This was a Primarch, or something close enough to make the distinction meaningless. Yet no name had ever been given, no legion linked, no remembrancer sketch, no war record, no citation, no betrayal, no loyalty. He was not listed among the lost, because he had never been found. Andron's breath slowed. Custodians did not fear, but their oaths were not blind. He activated his internal data slate and pinged Palace Command for The signal died before it left the vault. Not jammed, nullified, his optics flickered. The chamber was changing, not visibly, not structurally, but in rhythm. His heartbeat no longer aligned with his internal metronome. The air pulsed, a deep frequency, below auditory range, vibrated in his bones. Not aggression, not summons. Recognition, a forgotten prayer, surfaced in his mind, one whispered in the earliest vaults of Custodes' indoctrination. He who was sealed, not fallen. He who saw the pattern, not the throne. He who was kept from the stars because the stars could not bear him. Cetrion stared into the crystal, and the eyes inside slowly opened. They were not feral, not drugged, not wild with warp taint orgy. They were clear, measured, aware, and they stared back, not at the custodian's armor, not at his weapons, at him. Then the pod darkened. Andron staggered back as the anti-grav tethers sparked. The pod remained suspended, but no longer by mechanical means. It hovered because it chose to. The null field failed, but no surge followed. The pod remained stable. The stasis held. The occupant slept again, eyes shut, as if testing the room, as if waiting for a response. He had seen enough. Andron backed out of the vault. The gates sealed without prompt. The resonance ceased. The heartbeat returned to normal. He stood for a long time in the corridor, eyes closed, sensors off, letting the silence resettle. The vault was not broken. It had never been broken, because no one had ever dared to try. This was not abandonment. It was containment. He turned and walked the corridor alone. No alarm would sound. No report would be filed. But the thought clawed inside his mind, now quiet, persistent, inescapable. Not who was sealed, but why. The cult Mechanicus does not dream. Their thoughts are metal-laced and logic-bound, arranged in spirals of code and prayer, devoid of sleep's unpredictability. But beneath the furnace-riddled surface of Mars, where the red dust melts into iron veins and the Omniscia's voice is said to echo between data cathedrals, there exists a sect, too old to catalog, too silent to rebuke, and too consistent to ignore. They call themselves the Null Hypothesis. Not heretic, not loyalist, not aligned with any Forge World command echelon. They operate from a sealed zone beneath Noctis Labyrinthus, buried inside gravitational distortion fields and sealed vault memories. To most of the Martian priesthood, they are a rumor attached to a warning. Do not descend past. Layer 36. Do not search the quiet core. Do not question what the Omnicia did not deploy. But in the glow of failed stars and half-life plasma conduits, they wait, they listen, and what they hear is not noise. It is signal, a pattern, repeating in the noosphere, fractal in its compression, recursive in logic. Yet outside all known dialects of language, it does not change, but the interpretation does. Every attempt to decode it fractures the interpreter's logic stack. Machine minds crash, organics bleed from the eyes, but the null hypothesis persists. They believe it is a voice, not transmitting, but dreaming, not awake but present, not in orbit, not on Terra, not on any known battlefield. A Primarch never launched, one who never fell, one who never breached the warp-scattered veil, a brother not missing, not dead, still sealed. Mago, S. Emeritus, Calitho. Oh. A mind older than half the current Fabricator Lords walks the descending spiral alone. He has no No skittery honor guard. Only a mind coral of backup subroutines and his own three-part heart, ticking in a rhythm that matches the buried signal below. His limbs whir with archaic hydraulics. His breath, unnecessary, is regulated by incense-scented atmosphere processors, burning sacred oils once traded directly with the mechanicum of Lucius. The descent is not measured in meters. It is measured in stability. Reality twists below layer 40. Dado lattice grids show corridors that do not geometrically align. Turning left leads you back to yourself. Forward means nothing, but Keleth does not walk by sight. He walks by the signal. It grows stronger as he descends. On the 47th level, gravity stops. Time begins to fold. Vox recorders stutter. Machine souls cry and are silenced. Keleth unspools a tether of copper wire litany behind him, dragging ancestral hymns across the corridor walls. Every step is a prayer, every word a ward, and then dash stillness. He enters the chamber. It is not a vault, not a prison, not a shrine. It is a cradle, cylindrical, smooth, utterly unadorned. No markings, no sigils, no mechanicum seals or Terran glyphs, just a monolith, humming at a frequency that triggers every backup auditory implant simultaneously. Inside, suspended in something that is not fluid, not light, not vacuum, is a form, massive, unmoving, perfect. The pod has no interface, no activation room, no visible mechanism, but his implants surge as proximity triggers internal memory routines he never knew he possessed. Images, schematics, design theories, not knowledge acquired, knowledge installed. The figure inside is faceless, not obscured, musculature perfected, bone density beyond simulation, but the face is incomplete, as if waiting for final code, as if the sculptor had paused mid-sentence. Yet the pressure he exerts, even in stasis, is palpable. Keleth falls to his knees, not from faith but from math. This is not a failure of deployment. This is design suspension. A Primarch whose physical pattern was stabilized, but whose identity was withheld, not broken, not flawed, delayed, deferred by the Emperor's will or the Emperor's fear. The signal intensifies. Keleth's thoughts unravel. He sees the schematic of the galaxy in reverse, sees the scouring before the betrayal, sees titans bowing to a man not yet born, and at the center, this cradle, unmoved by warp, by time, by sin. He tries to speak, but his vox grill melts. Words are not allowed here. He reaches forward, not to touch, just to mark the distance between his god code and this silent twin. But the cradle pulses. The room folds inward, and in that compression of causality, Keleth understands. This Primarch was not denied a legion. He was denied a context. The others were scattered across the stars. He was never thrown, because he could not be. Outside the chamber, the rest of the null hypothesis kneel, not in worship, but in calculation. They rerun predictive fate. None resolve. None end with war. None end with peace. All end with change. They call him the constant, the control variable, the one who dreams backward. The cradle dims. Keleth's mind resets. Heat bleeds from his core. He is alone again. He does not remember what he saw, but he remembers what he didn't to name. There was no name, because to name something is to bind it to time, and this one, if it exists, is still outside of it. There are wars the Imperium remembers. Glorious slaughters recounted in murals and hymn, stitched into the litanies of the Adeptus Ministorum, where every martyr's name is etched with fire into cathedral stone. And then there is the seventh intercession, no planet recorded, no date preserved, no legion credited, just a corrupted string buried inside a forgotten remembrancer's picked log, catalogued only because a scrap cogitator refused deletion. No metadata survived, just a single label, jagged and blinking. S7 int, unsanctified. Her name was Ilara Ven, assigned to chronicle a compliance action near the galactic fringe, somewhere beyond the core of Segmentum Obscure. She was trained to paint, not endure, to write, not resist. Yet the opening image of her recovered file showed something beyond artistry, a vast cratered plain, soaked in viscera, under a sky that screamed in ultraviolet. The corpses were not human, but they had once worn human skin. Her first entry was dated, barely, a numeric fragment, Emi 31, 013. Early in the Great Crusade. Pre-heresy. Pre-Horus. But even in that first frame, the clarity is unnerving. She writes, not with reverence, but confusion. The warriors she is assigned to follow do not wear legion markings. No colors, no sigils. Armor configurations approximate Mark II Crusade pattern, but asymmetrical right pauldrons reinforced with adamantine that seems melted into place. Every warrior bears a red line beneath their left eye, tattooed in stark contrast to their otherwise expressionless faces. They speak in perfect synchronicity, never in public. Orders are relayed via sign or thought. Ilara never learns their name, not even once. Her initial assumption is that she's embedded with a Black Ops detachment, a test cohort perhaps. But her overseer grim scribe, named Talik, Marn corrects her in a single line. You are not here to ask. You are here to remember. What she records is not war. It is excision. A continent is cleansed in hours. Villages burned before their people finish blinking. Language matrices shattered, not suppressed. Entire lexicons removed from psychic memory. The enemy is never clearly shown. Not Xenos, not human, some hybrid. But the pict frames dissolve when enhanced, as if the subjects themselves reject being seen, and yet they scream. They always scream. Ilara's lens captures it all. Flickers of unnatural motion, soldiers killing with clean precision, then pausing not to pray or reload, but to watch, as if waiting for an unseen auditor. One frame catches her own reflection in a broken lens plate, blood smeared across her cheek. Behind her, a warrior kneels not in death, but in stillness. No wounds, just ... still. Then he disassembles himself. No scream, no collapse. He separates, limb by limb, as if following a reverse ritual. Internals exposed, muscle layering retracting in perfect spirals. He arranges each piece around his own torso like an anatomical diagram. Then he smiles, not at her, at the sky. The next dozen files are corrupted. Her voice log stutters. Visuals bleed. When the log recovers, her tone has shifted. No more framing, no more composition. She speaks in bursts. Panic coded in meter. This isn't a campaign, she whispers. It's a crucible. She identifies something called Trial Mechanism 7, referenced only once. A coded phrase used by the commanding figure named, never fully seen, whose voice enters her feed, distorted by machine-sung distortion. Measure resistance against non-standard belief structures. Evaluate adaptability. Call deviation post-confirmation. It was never about victory. The war was already won before she arrived. The enemy was civilization, one born of humans who had touched something older. Not chaos. There are no demons, no warp storms, no shrines. But Ilara records a village where no one speaks aloud, and yet everyone knows each other's secrets. Where memories are stored in teeth. Where dreams rot, if not shared daily. Too alien to fold into the Imperium. Too human to be labeled Xenos, so they are removed. The Remembrancer's final intact entry is a voice-only whisper. They wanted to see if the prototype could adapt without identity, a legion without name, a war without end, a victory without record. I think they passed. After that, silence. But there is one final fragment in the data log. A pict frame glitched, but readable. It shows a line of warriors standing shoulder to shoulder before a monolith. carved with Terran script, not High Gothic, not Mechanicum cant. Just one word: control. A test, a prototype, a force unleashed not to conquer bait, to measure the cost of obedience. They fought not to win, they fought to see if they could. And when they succeeded, they were buried. Because what the Emperor learned frightened even him. They arrived without warning, not by warp flare, not by astropathic scream, just silence. One moment, the outpost flickered on standard OSPEC scans. The next it was gone. No debris, no distress call, just absence clean, surgical, final dot. The planet was Lithorex, a dead rock clinging to the edge of the eastern fringe, marked by administratum, cartography, as strategic non-essential. No major resources, no cult activity. But it was here that the first confirmed visual was retrieved, grainy, corrupted, captured by a servo skull before its optics bled static, and it fell mid-air, like a puppet with its strings cut. The figure it recorded did not bear a sigil, no chapter badge, no honor stripe, armor matte gray, nearly black under starlight. No icon, no purity seal, no codex litany, etched in script across greaves or and no voice. The Inquisition responded. Ordo Xenos dispatched Kilti Marduk, drawn from cross-chapter Astartes, and led by Inquisitor Lyrian Vol, an operative known for linguistic deconstruction and pattern inference. Not a crusader, not a firebrand, a profiler. She had silenced cults that believed the warp spoke in reflections and dissected tyrannid, synapse, anomalies that dreamed in algebra. She did not believe in ghosts, not until Lithorex. Their arrival was unopposed. No orbital batteries, no Vox challenge, just surface readings indicating recent troop movements standardized in spacing, symmetrical in heat dispersion. No signs of distress, no bodies. Only order. The kill team advanced in textbook formations. Vol remained behind, buried in the data streams, tracking every thermal echo, every deviation, but there weren't any. The landscape had been sterilized with such precision, it read like theory, not application. The enemy had moved, not with aggression, but intentiones, if their sole purpose was to leave nothing off pattern. On day 2, the team found the monument, a single obelisk of ceramite buried beneath the sands. No inscription, but around its base, 6 Astartes, helmets, flawless, unworn, polished to mirror finish, marked for Maximus pattern. No chapter markings, no battle scarring. Team Sergeant Torhall of the Red Scars lifted one. Inside, a Dayton needle. Not Mechanicum standard, not Inquisition. Old, far older than the heresy. VHOL. Extracted it personally. Its encryption was not military. It was mathematical. A cascade of conditional logic loops embedded in harmonic fractals. Not data, doctrine. She translated the first line. Silence is the oath. Obedience is the name. Then the signal hit. Not warp, not psychic, just sound. Every member of the kill team collapsed at once. No wounds, no conflict, just neural interruption. Their bodies remained upright, gauntlets still locked around bolters, sensors still pinging, but their minds went dark. Dreams cut mid-thought, and then, from the fog beyond the monument, they walked 10 figures, identical in armor, unhurried in pace, each step synchronized, not by command, but by principle. They raised no weapons. They formed no phalanx. They merely existed, and the world around them quieted. One stopped, its helm swiveled toward Vol's position, though no visual feed should have revealed her. She did not run. She activated the last resort broadcasts, crumbling her psychic resonance, burning her ident codes into the new sphere, a final act of defiance and cataloging. But the figure did not move. Instead, it turned its palm outward, and in that gesture, she saw it not loyalty, not threat, recognition. Not of her, of the test. Her files later, salvaged from a rescue detail that arrived 8 days too late, recorded a single sentence in her final log: "They obey someone still." The Inquisition tried to seal the report, redact the audio, purge the imagery. But rumors survived. They call them the Null Legion, the Unclaimed, the Doctrine-bound warriors without heraldry, who descend only when logic fails, whose tactics mimic no known legion, yet outperform all. They do not speak because their orders were encoded in them before the galaxy had a language. They do not break because they were not born to adapt, only to persist. They are not traitors. They are not loyal. They are something that remembers. The intention behind the Emperor, not the man, not the myth, the pattern. The planet was called Farenthel, though no one remembered naming it, charted during the later years of the Great Crusade. Forgotten shortly after the heresy, it had been deemed agriculturally sufficient, spiritually compliant, and strategically irrelevant. Perfect for crops, perfect for silence. The kind of world the Imperium left alone, not out of mercy, but because forgetting it cost less than garrisoning it, until the children began to scream. It started in the hamlet of Darn's Hollow, a low-born cluster of synth barley farmers and cattle chemists, 3 generations deep. The screaming was not of pain, nor even of fear. It was harmonic, unified. 36 children, across 9 settlements, began vocalizing the same untranslatable phrase at precisely 0300 hours, planetary standard, not in Gothic, not in dialect, but in a tonal sequence that registered as coded astropathic, frequency compressed into breath. None of them remembered doing it. 2 weeks later, their parents began dreaming in formation, not shared dreams, synchronized dreams. They described trench lines too perfect to be real. Commands shouted in a voice none of them recognized, yet all obeyed. They awoke with phantom memories, knowing flanking procedures, remembering the smell of promethium under cold moons, recalling the names of brothers they'd never met. None of them had ever seen war. When the first family was found in the fields, entrenched, flanked, and arrayed like a textbook engagement, the Administratum flagged the world for investigation. By the time the Scholastica Psychana ship Orpheonic Dirge arrived, the dreams had stopped, but the behaviors had not. Children began forming phalanxes in schoolyards, standing in silence for hours. Mothers sang liturgies that translated into tactical kill orders when parsed through machines. Farmers traced trenches in their fields with staggering strategic accuracy, replicating fortification patterns not used since the Unification Wars. None knew why. Interrogator-cipher, Varn of the Ordo Hereticus, made planetfall accompanied by a 4-man retinue and 2 sanctioned psychers. The soil read clean. No warp contamination, no demonic incursion, no known Xenos influence. But beneath the primary township chapel, he found a ruin. Odell pre-imperial, buried beneath centuries of silt and forgetfulness. Within it, walls scrawled with memory etchings, deep grooves burned not by tool, but by nerve impulse, finger-length trenches, codified sequences, names without owners. One line repeated in perfect symmetry: "We were never given flags, only memories." The psychers refused to go further. One bled from the eyes, the other recited names until his tongue disintegrated. Varn proceeded alone. The inner chamber was lined with bones, not ossuaries, arrangements. They mimicked the structure of a command hierarchy. Vertebrae arranged in stacks matching officer rank, jawbones placed at the apex, ribs spread like command arcs. In the center, a single skull, larger than baseline human, with twin puncture marks through the temple, as if something had once attempted to extract memory through force. Behind it, scrawled in bone dust, "He did not command. He remembered for us." Varn transmitted nothing. When he returned to the surface, the children met him in formation. Uniform spacing, perfect posture, not smiling, not hostile, simply present. He asked them one question: "Who taught you this?" Their reply, unified, was a whisper: "He was never born, only carried." In orbit, the Orpheonic dirge began experiencing system bleed, not mechanical, cognitive. Servoskulls began repeating phrases they had never recorded. AI servitors drew schematics of a fortress world that had never existed. One junior navigator awoke from trance screaming battle orders in pre-Gothic script. Before transmission, silence cut in. The last recorded voxcast from the vessel's choir captain stated, "We are surrounded by memory. It sings, and it remembers louder than we do." Then nothing. The Ordo declared Ferenthel conditionally stable. No exterminatus. No sequestering, just a blanket silence. Order. Ships redirected. Surveys closed. But to this day, Imperial databanks report anomalous vox bursts from Ferenthal's orbit every 36 hours, on a frequency unused since M29. The messages are always the same: tactical summaries, obsolete formations, battle reports from conflicts not listed in any archive, and always the same closing signature: awaiting instruction. Across Ferenthal's grain fields, the children still play in formation. The adults still dream in ranks, and deep beneath the chapel, bones still listen. They do not know his name, only that he left them something. Not doctrine, not war. Memory. They found the moon by accident, not on a crusade path, not on a warp-charted vector, just an emergency drop during a Geller field malfunction. The ship, Tertius Crown, limped into low orbit, bleeding plasma in prayer, its astropaths blind from exposure. When the hull stabilized, all augurs pointed toward a single signal, broad spectrum, rhythmic, not a beacon, a heartbeat. The moon had no name, no weather, just broken stone and the dust of things once liturgical. And in the center of that silence, a monastery shattered into thirds. Inquisitor Miriam Thassel went down alone. She was not the kind to fear architecture, but this place exhaled intention. Its stones were hand-cut, not extruded. Its chapel half collapsed and half buried held no Aquila, no sigil, no relic, but on the altar, a robe, plain, undyed, preserved without stasis, as if entropy knew better. The wall behind bore scripture not etched, but pounded, each word hammered into stone with the same phrase. Over and over, he would not ascend. Thassel retrieved the fragments, that bone charms, handwritten testimonies, stored in wax-sealed jars buried beneath floorstones. The language was divergent but not alien. Mid-M30, Earth origin, written in the cadence of pre-imperial gospel. They described a man who walked among them, but did not preach, who built defenses, but never claimed command, who knew war but refused it, who healed the sick and then vanished before thanks could be given. They called him the Denier, not out of scorn, out of reverence. They believed he was one of the Emperor's sons, not because he said so, but because he never had to. He did not perform miracles. He simply existed in ways that bent the world around him. Crops refused to die near him. Wounds closed faster. Arguments fell quiet. And when attacked, he did not strike back. But the attackers wept blood from the eyes and collapsed, as if their own violence recoiled from itself. He never declared allegiance. He never demanded faith. He simply walked. The monastery had been his resting place, not a temple, but a refusal, a place to remain unchanged. Records state that emissaries came robed figures bearing icons of the Aquila and the lightning bolt. Speaking of legions and destiny, they offered him banners, a fleet, a name. He turned them away, not with scorn, with sorrow. He said only one thing, carved once into the altar's underside: to become more than man is to forget why man mattered. They say the emissaries left in silence. They say the next visitors brought fire, not known forces, unmarked, silent. efficient. The monastery was razed within hours. Survivors scattered, writings buried in haste, prayers stuffed into corpse mouths for preservation, and still the heartbeat signal pulsed, 1,000 years later, unbroken. Facile servoskulls picked up a sublayer to the signalo-harmonic, frequencies matching those used in early Astartes training, specifically the mnemonic loops used to stabilize legionnaire cognition under duress. But the patterns were ... gentler, less forced, almost ... contemplative. She followed the signal into the crypt below the altar. New sarcophagus. No preserved body, just a chamber lined with still-burning candles, flame untouched by time, by vacuum, by entropy. In the center, a stone seat, worn smooth by use. No dust, no bones. Only absence. But in that absence, calm. She did not understand until she stepped outside and saw what the moon had become. A barren world, lifeless rock. But now where she walked, moss grew in her footprints. The air thickened. Her auspex registered microbial genesis. Change, not imposed, but encouraged. Not divine, not psychic, just presence. And then she remembered, not in flashbacks, not in dreams, in certainty. The denier had not disappeared, he had dispersed. His refusal of apotheosis had become a kind of truth, one that did not conquer, did not command, but simply endured. And that was why he was forgotten, not for failure, for dangerous humility. A Primarch who rejected destiny is a threat not to chaos but to the very concept of empire. He did not rebel, he just opted out, and that was a sin. No doctrine could tolerate the signal. Ended 3 hours after Thassel departed. She never spoke of the monastery again, but in her final report, buried in Ordo files, never released, she wrote one line: he was more than a god. He was content to remain a man. They emerged without signal. No warp wake. No via conflare. No broadcast of allegiance. Just real space distortion at the edge of Segmentum Tempestus, followed by the arrival of a fleet that should not have existed. 73 vessels, all tagged by Imperial machine leks, as Heresy Yera constructs, yet none registered in any archived muster list. No chapter heraldry, no ecclesiarchal blessing. Their hulls bore no name, just sequence numbers, etched in logic notation along the prow, practical, emotionless, efficient. The first contact was not hostile, it was precise. An Imperial Navy listening post in orbit over the gas giant. Veritas Prime caught the initial visual. They logged the incoming vessels, attempted standard voxel, then tried emergency high-fidelity signals. There was no reply. Not because of failure, because there was nothing to reply to. Within 3 minutes, the station ceased transmission. Power grid intact, airlock sealed. No explosion, just silence. When an investigation crew docked hours later, they found the interior untouched. No blood, no signs of struggle. But every officer and crewman was gone. Uniforms folded, vox recorders wiped, bridge systems locked in standby, as if the inhabitants had simply stood up and left. The Adeptus Novus launched a containment protocol. Sector Battle Group Hecaton formed under Admiral Law Terras, a veteran of 3 Chaos incursions and 2 Orc purges. He reviewed the logs and made a single observation: they're not deploying, they're holding formation. The fleet did not advance, it arranged itself, geometric precision. Lancers flanking dictators, frigates at 2.3-degree elevation, escort patterns that hadn't been doctrinal since the early Crusade. Admiral Terras deployed in force. He approached under full signal. 7 cruisers, 2 carriers. Vox blaring challenge codes as ancient as the Imperium itself. The unknown fleet didn't respond. It rotated, a single shift, 1-degree pivot, lateral axis, and then it held. Terras gave the order to fire. The results were immediate, no evasive maneuvers. The Not Legion vessels simply, adjusted. Every torpedo detonation met with real-time shielding modulation. Every lance beam refracted just enough to lose penetration. Plasma rounds intercepted by micro-interceptor drones that hadn't been manufactured since M30. No panic, no rage, no escalation, only correction. By hour 3, Terrace's battle group had lost to ships not to destruction, but disassembly. Boarding pods were countered by precision boarding return. Strike teams found themselves ejected in their own boarding torpedoes, rerouted by internal ship architecture that shouldn't have known how to interface with their navigation. It wasn't war, it was refusal. The Not Legion did not seek to destroy. They contained. Every engagement looped. Every assault returned to origin. An attack initiated would resolve itself in counter-loop within minutes, until the aggressor simply ran out of intent. Terras called for reinforcements. They never arrived. Signal interference. Not jamming. Not warp distortion. Something in the Not Legion fleet simply prevented decision propagation. Commands lost their sharpness. Crew began to second-guess. Mission clarity degraded. Officers refused to leave quarters, murmuring about orders without source. And through it all, the Not Legion waited. Eventually, Terras tried communication, not through standard channels, but through formation. He mirrored their fleet structure. 3 destroyers positioned on equidistant intercept arcs, 2 cruisers and backline support. The exact same layout the Not Legion had held since their arrival. Only then did they respond. 1 vessel broke pattern. A single cruiser moved forward. It transmitted exactly 1 phrase, not via Vox, but burst data into the Imperial ship's logic core. We remain as we were made. Instruction incomplete. Awaiting designation. Terras, half broken by then, whispered the only thing he could muster. Who made you? The reply was slower. The one who never came. And then they vanished. No warp signature, no engine wake, just a fleet, no longer present. Removed not by travel, but by decision, as if their presence was no longer necessary. The segmentum flagged the incident as a data glitch, classified, buried, reports rewritten. Admiral Terras retired under medical decree. Mouths stitched shut by decree of the Ordo, but whispers leaked. They speak of a legion that was assembled without a father. Born from gene seed, sequenced from an incomplete template, never folded into the codex, never tested for loyalty, just constructed, patterned, held, and when no Primarch came to shape them, they shaped themselves, not traitors, not fanatics, just obedience in stasis. Perfection without purpose, and when they emerge, it is not to conquer. It is to remind the galaxy of the Emperor's unfinished sentence. A legion that was never told who to be, so they became the placeholder, a reflection of command, forever waiting to be completed. There are moments in Imperial history that should not exist, not because they contradict the truth, but because they do not fit the architecture of the myth. One such moment lies buried beneath 6 layers of Ordo Redactus encryption redacted, not for heresy, but for destabilizing clarity. It begins with a phrase, 3 words, unrecorded in any human dialect, not Low Gothic, not pre-unification Terra, not warped. The file that contains it is labeled simply, Vox penumbra 41. Its waveform is corrupted, not digitally, psychically. The machine spirits that attempt to play it suffer recursive breakdown, cogitators implode, Vox scribes go blind. Even sanctioned astropaths experience aphasia and auditory hallucinations after exposure. And yet, the effects are known, because it was once spoken aloud, on the world of Calistredon, during the 136th Compliance Crusade. A Primarch brought his full legion to bear upon a resisting population. The planet had refused to yield, not out of rebellion, but out of memory. The people of Calist claimed an ancient right to be left alone. They raised no arms. They held no heretical rites. They simply broadcast one repeating transmission into the void. We remember before you were named. The Primarch arrived in orbit. He did not negotiate. He landed personally, flanked by his honor guard. As the capital city opened its gates, every picked capture froze. Every auspex flatlined. Only one transmission continued black and white. Vox footage from a servo skull, trailing behind the column. It recorded the moment. A figure stepped forward from the crowd unarmed, clothed in pre-imperial robes. No augmentics, no shield. Just a pendant, a sigil composed of intersecting arcs and broken lines, impossible to focus on, as if the eye rejected it. The figure spoke 3 words. There was no attack, no sound, even. But the Primarch stopped walking. His advance halted mid-stride, not from force, from recognition. He did not speak. He did not draw his blade. He fell to one knee, not in agony, not in rage, in silence. His honor guard froze. The figure turned, walked away. The crowd followed, wordless. By the time signal clarity returned, the Primarch was standing alone. He ordered a full withdrawal. He never gave reason. The compliance was marked as complete. The city was declared pacified, but the picked captures never resumed, and the words were never recorded. Only the aftermath remained. Elian Kor spent 9 years attempting to reconstruct the phrase from psychic residue. He traced echoes in astropathic bleed, compared warp frequencies with ancient dialects, even simulated lost Terran tonal languages from M1, M5. All failed. He began dreaming of the figure, of walking cities, of sigils that bled when looked upon. His final notes were a single line, scrawled in charcoal. It was not language. It was recognition. The Ordo Hereticus seized his remains. There was no funeral. Others followed. Psychona Matriarch, Voline used choir triangulation to backtrace the harmonic underlay of the phrase. Her team decoded 24 partial phonemes across 11 dream layers, each resembling command structures used in Proto-Legion airfield indoctrination. But when assembled, the phrase didn't instruct. It reflected, as if the voice had spoken, the Primarch's own thoughts before he could form them. When her report was submitted, half the high choir went mute. The matriarch herself whispered to her handler, "We heard ourselves before we were born." She was disintegrated 3 hours later. No trial. The sigil, once preserved in fragmentary sketch, is now erased from all data vaults. Only its negative remains a void in the archive where image should be. If accessed, the screen flickers. Viewers experience olfactory hallucinations, wet stone, burned parchment, blood under heat. The identity of the Primarch remains unspoken, but patterns emerge. A single legion altered its war doctrine after that campaign, shifting from conquest to containment, from speech to silence. Rituals of self-audit began. Battle cries were replaced with encoded hymns. Records were purged of post-calloused engagements. Their victories became sterile, their oaths shorter. Their gene seed records show a sudden mutation, elevated empathy receptors, cognitive cross-binding. As if the demigod who led them had remembered something. Not a betrayal, not a loss, just ... a truth that made conquest irrelevant. The whisper was never replicated. Every attempt results in madness, silence, or death. Because it wasn't meant to be understood, it was meant to end understanding. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a command. It was a reminder that even the Emperor's sons are only myth until they hear who they were before that myth began. They came in silence, as all Ordo Redactus teams do. No banners, no records, no names spoken aloud. Their task was not to rewrite history. Their task was to decide what had never happened at all. The summons came from beneath the Imperial Palace, not the upper sanctum, not the sanctified halls or ecclesiarchal spires, but from deep below, Far past the vault lines, beneath even the submechanical roots of the throne itself, a maintenance servitor had triggered a recursive error in a systems check, a misalignment in a machine that should not have failed. When dissected, its final data pulse led to an unregistered subterminal buried in a corridor sealed since the throne's activation in M30. Access required 13 separate levels of Genoth, 5 forgotten prayer codes, and the direct psychic override of the throne's resonance. It was not locked. It had simply not been meant to be opened again. The terminal itself was primitive. No mu ports, no adaptive haptics, just a single screen, blinking green. The data slate beside it was fused into the console. Fused not by heat or age, but decision melded in ritual. The way a tomb is sealed. The message was simple, a single line, repeated 721 times. He was not wrong. The Redactus lead, Agent Enan Vale, attempted to extract the slate. It disintegrated upon touch, not in degradation, in refusal, but the terminal remained active. Its internal memory, untouched by time, opened with a command line /origin core. What followed was not a message, it was a blueprint, not of weaponry, not of war, of thought. Phase-locked logs from the earliest construction of the Golden Throne, data streams of the Emperor's original cognitive architecture, not the worshipped construct known today, but something colder, more precise. These were not commands. These were questions. How much must be forgotten to sustain obedience? Can divinity survive its own source code? And then, deeper files that did not match Imperial times, codenames only. 2 files locked. 2 keys missing Primarchs. 0xn case Aleph. Primarch _OY. Case _Unuande were not labeled as failures, not listed among the 20, not mentioned at all, just referenced, in passing, by the system's own internal flagging, non-compliant to cosmogenic parameters. Retention risk, irreversible. Memory erase, pending. Agent Vale's retinue hesitated. There were no sigils here, no symbols of chaos, no warp taint, just decision clean, brutal, mathematical. The Emperor had not lost 2 sons. He had chosen to forget them, not out of shame, but out of risk. These files didn't describe rebellion. They described recognition of what the Primarchs were, of what the Emperor was becoming. One file contained a transcript, fragmented but legible. You do not need worship, you need witness. And if we refuse both, then history will be easier without you. The console glitched, then displayed a waveform, a pulse pattern matching known brainwave emissions from early psychic augmentation trials. The implication was clear. The sons had seen not just what their father planned, but what it required. The cost, the manipulation, the myth. They did not reject him out of rebellion. They stepped away because they understood too soon. That was their heresy, not war, perspective. Vale tried to shut the console down. Protocol demanded erasure, but the system refused all inputs. The screen dimmed to black dot, then lit again with a final message. Regret is not weakness, it is memory unpermitted. And then the console self-sealed, not with code, but with intent. Every wire within turned to ash. The stone floor ricked. The doorframe collapsed. When they left, there was no record it had ever opened. Ordo Redactus marked the corridor sealed by geological instability. The throne continued. Humming above, Agent Vale retired from the Ordo 1 cycle later. His last written statement, unapproved for archive, was intercepted and burned. But one phrase, hand-scrawled on the back of a discarded cogitation report, was retrieved from the ashes. We always asked why 2 were missing. We never asked who removed them. The Emperor does not speak. He does not answer. But somewhere beneath the palace, the memory of what he chose not to build still pulses. Not gone, just denied. They walked without sanction. The Custodes, nameless by his own choice, had already removed his rank plates. The Psyker, known only as Eilon Reth, moved with the brittle grace of a man whose mind had begun to leak at the edges. Every step they took beneath the imperial palace was an offense to doctrine, to memory, to stability itself. No map guided them, only instinct, the kind bred into a custodian not through training, but through proximity and nearness to something ancient, something massive, something always just behind the curtain of gold and fire that the Imperium called faith. Eilon followed because the voices had stopped screaming, and when Psykers go quiet, it is never peace. Vault 000 does not appear on any schematic, not because it is hidden, but because the palace was built around it. Not over, not above, around. Like a body forming scar tissue around a splinter too deep to extract. Custodes training does not include knowledge of the vault. It is not taught, but those who stand near the golden throne long enough begin to dream of it. It does not resist. It does not guard itself, because it expects no visitors. The descent took hours, or seconds, or none at all. Time dilated with every level, cogitator lights dimmed, pressure inverted. At some point, the custodian removed his helmet not from heat, not from protocol, but because he wanted it to see him. The vault door was not sealed, it was ajar. No inscription, no SERVITO, no defense system, just a room beyond the scope of architecture geometry, bent not by the warp, but by the weight of something refusing to forget itself. Eilon fell to his knees first, not from pain, from recognition. His mind flooded not with visions, but intentions, emotions unspoken, recorded not in word or memory, but in resonance. The Custodes entered. The chamber was circular, smooth, no light source, but no shadow. In the center, a chair occupied, not a sarcophagus, not a throne, just a chair-functional Terran, unadorned, and the figure in it was breathing, barely. He was not in stasis, not in restraint. He simply waited, human in form, larger than average, but not colossal. Musculature faded, face lined, not from age, but stillness, armor unmarked, uniform absent. His eyes were closed. Eilon approached, hands trembling. Blood began to drip from his left ear. The figure spoke, not aloud. Inside, have they come to kill me again? The Custodes did not draw his blade. He spoke. Why are you still here? The answer came not in language, but in memory. The Primarch had not been lost. He had not been deployed. He had been set aside, not as failure, not as threat, but as answer. An answer the Emperor never dared to ask. He was the final template. Not first, not last, not alpha, not omega. 0. The test subject that passed without breaking. He did not hunger for war, did not crave obedience, did not seek purpose. He only listened, and when the Emperor looked into his mind, he found reflection, not potential, not loyalty, recognition. The others could be shaped, could be used. This one could only understand, so he was placed here, not hidden, not erased, deferred. Because if he had walked the stars, the Imperium would have become something else. Not a war machine, not a burning cathedral, but a conversation. And that was not what the galaxy was built to carry. Eilon sobbed. He saw visions of wars that never began, treaties signed in languages never spoken, chaos denied not through force, but through incomprehension, a galaxy quieted by empathy too deep to exploit. The Custodes stepped forward. What do we call you? The figure smiled. You never named me, so I learned silence. Eilon asked the final question. Why didn't you leave? The answer was soft, a ripple in bone, because someone might come back, and I would like to talk to them. They did not stay long. The Custodes marked nothing. Eilon forgot half the descent before reaching the surface, but one line stayed with them both. He was not sleeping. He was listening. The Imperium above roared on. Wars burned. Saints died. Planets wept. And beneath it all, in Vault 000, the Forgotten Brother sat, not dead, not mad, just waiting. The story does not end. It never began.